On June 3, 2025, CCTV footage at the Pusat Bandar Puchong LRT station captured a moment that would later be described as both sudden and tragic. A 36-year-old Taiwanese man was walking alone along the edge of the platform, seemingly unaware of how close he was to danger. There was nothing unusual about his behavior at first. He wasn't running, wasn't distracted in any obvious way, just moving along like any other passenger. But in a split second, everything changed. He lost his footing and fell directly onto the train tracks below. The moment he hit the ground, he looked up and saw an oncoming train approaching. There was no time to react, no opportunity to climb back up or move out of the way. The train struck him moments later, coming to a stop only seconds after impact. People standing on the platform could only watch in shock, frozen in place as the reality of what had just happened set in. Emergency responders were called, but by the time they arrived, there was nothing that could be done. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Although the CCTV footage provided a clear sequence of events, authorities continued their investigation to rule out any possibility of foul play. In response to the incident, transport officials instructed Prasarana, the operator of Malaysia's rapid rail system, to install platform screen doors across LRT stations to prevent similar accidents in the future. What makes this case so difficult is how quickly it unfolded. A routine moment, something that seemed completely ordinary, turned into something irreversible in a matter of seconds. But not every terrifying moment happens in public. Sometimes it happens in the place where you're supposed to feel safest. A couple in Georgia had installed a home security camera in their bedroom, mainly so they could keep an eye on their dog while they were away at work. It was something simple and practical, the kind of thing a lot of people set up without really thinking twice about it. One night, after the woman had put their dog in his crate and gone to bed, everything felt completely normal. The house was quiet, nothing seemed out of place, and there was no reason to expect anything unusual. But as she was lying there, she suddenly heard a cough coming through the camera's speaker. At first, it didn't fully register. It's the kind of sound you might try to ignore or explain away, maybe thinking it came from outside or from another room. But then she looked over at the camera, and that's when she noticed the blue light had turned on. That light only activates when someone is actively watching the live feed. At that moment, the situation shifted completely. Lying in bed and realizing that someone could be watching you through a device in your own room is something that doesn't feel real at first, but there's no easy way to explain it either. Trying to make sense of what was happening, she reached for her phone and texted her boyfriend, who was at work at the time, asking why he had the camera open. But almost immediately, he responded, confused, asking what she meant. So, now there was no simple explanation left. No one she knew was supposed to be connected to it. And then it got even worse. A voice came through the speaker, not a notification or a glitch, but an actual voice coming from the same camera that was sitting in their bedroom.
Wake up! Hello, doggy, 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 come here, doggy! Hello? Excuse me. I can see you in the bed, come on, wake the f*** up.
At that point, any doubt was gone. She got up and removed the batteries from the device, cutting it off completely. Later, the couple discovered that someone had gained access to their account multiple times. It hadn't just happened once, but at least 4 separate occasions where an unknown person had been able to connect to their camera and view the live feed. They reported it to the police, but nothing ever came from the investigation. What makes this case so unsettling isn't just what happened in that moment, but what it implies. Because unlike a lot of these stories, this doesn't rely on something unknown or unexplainable. It's the fact that someone had access, someone had been watching, and for a period of time, they were able to do it without being noticed. But while that story raises questions about invasion and control, the next one is about something much more deliberate. On May 29, 2024, 63-year-old Scott Habermal was cycling to work at Sandia National Laboratories in Albuquerque when something completely unexpected happened. As he rode along his usual route, a car suddenly swerved into the bike lane and struck him. The impact was fatal, and by the time authorities arrived, there was no way to save him. At first, the case seemed almost impossible to solve. CCTV footage from a nearby church showed the vehicle involved, but there were no clear images of the people inside. There were no immediate leads, no identifiable suspects, and no clear direction for the investigation. For months, the case remained unsolved. Then in 2025, everything changed when a video began circulating online.
You're gonna hit him hella fast, nigga. Just bump him, bruh.
Like, you like bump him?
Yeah, just bump him. Go like 15, 20.
In the recording, voices could be heard inside a vehicle, laughing and discussing what they were about to do. One of them said, "Just bump him, brah," moments before the car struck Scott. The video provided something investigators hadn't had before: identifiable voices. A school principal and several witnesses were able to recognize them, linking the individuals in the recording to the incident. On March 17, 2025, a 13-year-old was arrested and charged with conspiracy, leaving the scene, and illegal possession of a handgun. An 11-year-old was also taken into custody. Later, in May 2025, a 15-year-old was arrested after further analysis connected him to the case. In total, 4 suspects were charged. What makes this case particularly disturbing is not just the act itself, but the intent behind it. It wasn't an accident. It was something planned, recorded, and shared, turning a routine morning into something that ended in tragedy. The footage exposed intent in a way investigators hadn't seen at first. And this next case follows a similar pattern, where the truth only emerges after the original story starts to fall apart. On January 13, 2010, 16-year-old twin sisters Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead returned home from school and claimed to have discovered their mother dead in a pool of blood. One of the girls ran outside and flagged down a deputy who happened to be patrolling nearby, triggering an immediate investigation. At first, the situation appeared to be a tragic case of a violent home invasion, and the girls were treated as victims. Their mother, 34-year-old Nikki Whitehead, was found in the bathtub, suffering from severe injuries. She had wounds to her head, bite marks, cuts, and scratches across her body, indicating a violent and prolonged struggle. But as investigators began speaking with the twins, inconsistencies started to appear. Their story didn't fully align with the evidence, and small details began to raise suspicion. They claimed they had not seen their mother that morning, and that she had locked herself in her room before they left for school. They said they had left around 8 a.m. and arrived at school shortly after. However, CCTV footage told a different story. The girls were seen entering school well after 10 a.m., and earlier footage placed them at a gas station around that same time. Their timeline didn't match their statements. Detectives also noticed something else during questioning. The girls were wearing gloves, and when asked to remove them, investigators found fresh cuts and bite marks on both of them. They attempted to explain the injuries by claiming they had fought each other earlier, but the explanation didn't fully hold up. At one point, one of the twins even demonstrated biting herself, trying to support the claim. Despite the growing suspicion, police initially allowed them to return home while continuing the investigation. Over the next 4 months, they gathered forensic evidence, including DNA samples and bite mark analysis. Eventually, the evidence pointed back to the twins. In May 2010, both were arrested and charged with their mother's murder. For years, they denied any involvement, even as more inconsistencies emerged. Then, one of them finally broke.
I feel like blood, and I hit with blood.
In January 2014, Tasmia pleaded guilty and revealed what had actually happened. A fight had broken out between them and their mother that morning, escalating into violence. They struck her with a ceramic pot, bit her, and stabbed her multiple times. Afterward, they moved her body to the bathroom and attempted to clean the scene. When they realized they couldn't cover it up, they created a false story and went to school as if nothing had happened. In February 2014, Jasmia also pleaded guilty. Both were sentenced to 30 years in prison and are currently held in separate facilities. But while that case stayed hidden behind a false story for months, the next one plays out in a burst of open violence. On the evening of February 22, 2023, 37-year-old Neil Canny, also known as Neil Wilson, spent time with his family at his home on Mitchell Road in Glasgow. To those around him, it may have seemed like a normal evening, but behind the scenes, Neil had already been living under serious threat. He was one of 6 individuals believed to be actively targeted by organized crime groups operating in Scotland. These weren't minor disputes or isolated incidents, but part of a much larger network of violence tied to control over drug supply and criminal influence in the region. In the early hours of February 23rd, at approximately 1:15 in the morning, that threat became reality. A group of men arrived outside Neil's home, dressed in dark clothing and armed with a firearm. Surveillance cameras captured the moment they moved in, quickly approaching the property before forcing their way inside. What followed was rapid and deliberate. The gunman raised the weapon and fired repeatedly, once, twice, 3 times, continuing until a total of 8 shots had been discharged. Neil was struck multiple times, primarily in the face and head. The footage captures the sound of those gunshots, a brief but intense moment that reflects how quickly everything unfolded. By the time police and the Scotland Ambulance Service arrived at the scene, Neil was critically injured. He was transported to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, but despite efforts to save him, he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The investigation that followed led to the arrest of 7 individuals: Kieran Marin, Jack Benson, Brendan Ballock, Kieran Henry, Michael Monroe, Dale Russell, and Martin McCusker. Authorities allege that they were acting as part of a coordinated and highly dangerous criminal group. According to police, this gang was involved in multiple violent operations, including plans targeting other individuals, among them a young mother. The motive appears to be tied to expanding control over organized crime activities in Glasgow, particularly drug distribution networks. After the shooting, the suspects reportedly fled the scene quickly. Investigators believe the gunman escaped using an electric scooter, allowing them to move through the area rapidly and avoid immediate capture. CCTV footage played a critical role in the case, helping authorities trace movements before and after the attack, ultimately leading to the identification of those involved. The 7 men are scheduled to stand trial, where they face a range of serious charges, including murder, multiple counts of attempted murder, possession of Class A substances with intent to supply, and participation in organized crime activity. In total, the case includes around 14 separate charges. So far, none of the accused have entered a plea. Their silence, despite the volume of evidence gathered, suggests a coordinated legal strategy as they prepare for trial. What makes this case particularly striking is not just the violence itself, but the setting. Carrying out an attack like this at someone's home, a place where family members may be present, represents a level of escalation that even within organized crime is rarely seen. It highlights just how far these groups are willing to go in pursuit of control and influence. Now, after this brutal case, the next clip is very different in tone, but it's still the kind of footage that makes people stop and rewind. A strange and unsettling incident was captured inside a local pizzeria during what appeared to be a completely normal work shift. The security footage shows several employees going about their routine, preparing food and working around the ovens like they likely had countless times before. Nothing about the moment seems unusual at first, and there's no indication that anything out of the ordinary is about to happen. But then, without any warning, something suddenly goes wrong. A pizza cutter, which had been resting near the oven, is abruptly launched forward, flying off the surface and striking one of the workers directly in the head. The movement is quick and unexpected, catching everyone off guard, including the person who was hit. What makes the clip stand out is how sudden and unnatural it looks at first glance. There's no visible interaction leading up to it, no one touching the object, and the employees' reactions appear completely genuine, as if they're just as confused as anyone watching the footage afterward. Because of that, some people have suggested that it could be something more than just an accident, even going as far as to describe it as possible paranormal activity. The idea comes from how the object seems to move on its own, without an obvious cause in the moment. At the same time, there's a more grounded explanation that's been put forward. It's possible that the conveyor belt of the pizza oven caught the cutter as it moved, pulling it slightly before releasing it with enough force to send it flying forward, almost like a slingshot. From that angle, the motion could easily look sudden and unexplainable, especially on camera. Whether it's a mechanical accident or something that just appears more mysterious than it actually is, the clip is a good example of how quickly an ordinary moment can turn into something that feels difficult to explain at first glance. But while that clip looks strange at first, the next one is disturbing for reasons that become painfully clear. On September 21st, 2019, at around 9:50 p.m., CCTV captured Cristina Ortiz Lozano walking alongside a man she was on a date with. The evening appeared relaxed and uneventful as they moved between locations, first visiting Sprinkle's ice cream parlor, then heading to the Giddy Bridge pub on London Road. To anyone watching, it looked like a normal night out. But what Cristina didn't know was that someone else was following them. Her ex-boyfriend, Abdelaziz El Yechoui Urza, had been watching from a distance. The two had been together for over a decade, having met in school and later moving from Spain to the UK together. But after years of being in a relationship, Cristina ended things in August 2019. While she had begun moving on with her life, he had not. That night, he followed her silently, staying just far enough back to avoid being noticed. CCTV footage shows him trailing behind as Cristina and her date made their way toward her flat on Spear Road. When they arrived, he was already there, waiting outside with flowers in his hands. Cristina entered the building while her date remained outside. Moments later, Abdelaziz followed her inside. Once inside, the situation escalated quickly. He took a kitchen knife and attacked her, stabbing her 23 times in the neck, chest, and abdomen. Cristina was pronounced dead at the scene. Police later found Abdelaziz in the garden, suffering from stab wounds to his chest and other minor injuries. He was treated and then taken into custody. On March 17, 2020, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 19 years. The case is a stark reminder of how unresolved relationships and obsession can escalate into violence, often without warning, even when everything appears normal on the surface. And that takes us to the day of September 30th, 2020, when the family of 32-year-old Lorraine Cox reported her missing. At first, it didn't seem like a typical disappearance. Messages were still being sent from her social media accounts, giving the impression that she was active and safe. But something about them didn't feel right. Her family quickly noticed that the tone of the messages was off. There were strange spelling errors, unusual phrasing, and repeated excuses whenever they asked to speak with her directly. Phone calls were avoided. Video calls never happened. The more they read, the more convinced they became that whoever was sending those messages wasn't Lorraine. That growing suspicion led to a police investigation, and as part of that, Detectives began reviewing hours of CCTV footage to piece together her last known movements. In one clip, they found the moment that would begin to unravel everything. 2 days earlier, Lorraine had been walking home alone after a night out with friends in Exeter. It was a route she knew well, and nothing about her behavior suggested she felt unsafe. She walked calmly, hands in her pockets, unaware of what was about to happen. But she wasn't alone. A man could be seen trailing behind her, keeping his distance at first before eventually approaching her. CCTV later showed him persuading her to go with him to his flat, which was located above a kebab shop. That was the last time Lorraine was ever seen alive. From there, the footage becomes even more disturbing. The same man is later seen leaving the building multiple times, carrying bags and disposing of items in different bins across the city. But Lorraine is never seen leaving. The man was identified as Azam Mangori, a 24-year-old Iraqi Kurd who had previously been denied asylum and was facing deportation. Inside his flat, he suffocated Lorraine with her own t-shirt and left her body there for 8 days. During that time, he used her SIM card to send messages to her family and friends, pretending to be her in an attempt to delay suspicion. But when the missing person report was filed and the pressure increased, he panicked. He dismembered her body and scattered her remains across Exeter. Some parts were found in alleyways near his flat, while others were discovered nearly 9 kilometers away in woodland areas. On April 7, 2021, Azam Mangori was found guilty of Lorraine's murder and sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 20 years. The case remains one of the most chilling examples of how digital communication can be manipulated to hide the truth, even after something unthinkable has already happened. It's especially disturbing because the killer tried to make it seem like she was still alive. And in this last case, investigators are again forced to piece together the truth through digital evidence and surveillance. On February 22, 2024, 22-year-old Laken Riley sent a message to her mother at 8:55 in the morning. "Good morning, about to go for a run if you're free to talk." It was a simple, routine message, the kind that wouldn't stand out at the time, but would later become one of the last normal moments before everything changed. Laken was a nursing student at Augusta University's Athens campus, known for her dedication and her routine of going out for runs. That morning, she left her apartment wearing workout clothes, taking precautions by sharing her location with her roommates before heading out. At 9:03, she attempted to call her mother, Allison Phillips, but didn't get an answer. She then continued her run, listening to music as she moved along a familiar trail. Trail cameras captured her at 9:05, running with her iPhone in her left hand. By 9:06, she had moved out of view. At 9:11, something changed. Laken activated the emergency SOS function on her phone, automatically calling 911. The call lasted 1 minute and 8 seconds. During that time, the operator received no clear verbal response, only background noise and what was described as a brief male voice. Her mother, unaware of what had happened, tried calling back at 9:24 but received no answer. As time passed, concern began to grow. At 9:37, she sent a message saying, "You're making me nervous by not answering while you're running. Are you okay?" By 11:47, the tone had shifted further. "Please call me. I'm very worried about you." At 12:05, Laken's roommates, Sophia Magana and Lily Steiner, noticed that her shared location had stopped moving. Realizing something might be wrong, they went out to search the trail themselves, bringing their dog with them. During their search, they found Laken's earbuds on the ground and immediately contacted police. At 12:38, officers discovered her body in a wooded area near Lake Herrick, partially covered with leaves and located approximately 20 meters from the main trail. She had suffered multiple blunt force injuries to the head and had been asphyxiated. Data from her smartwatch indicated that her heart had stopped at 9:28. Investigators quickly began gathering evidence. DNA was found under her fingernails, indicating a struggle. A thumbprint not belonging to Lakin was identified on her phone. Earlier surveillance footage showed a man in dark clothing attempting to enter a student apartment between 7:30 and 8 o'clock that morning. Campus cameras later captured the same individual wandering the area for over 2 hours. Police searched nearby trash bins and made a significant discovery. Inside a blue recycling bin roughly 500 meters from the crime scene, they found a dark hooded jacket stained with blood. Nearby, in bushes, they recovered black disposable kitchen gloves, one of which had a hole in the thumb. The blood on the jacket was confirmed to be Lakin's. A nearby doorbell camera captured footage at 9:44, showing a man wearing a black Adidas hat disposing of the jacket. This was approximately 15 minutes after Lakin's heart had stopped. The following morning, officers identified a man wearing a similar hat. He was identified as Jose Ibarra, a 26-year-old who presented a counterfeit green card. Officers noted visible blood on his hat, along with scratches and injuries on his hands and arms. Police then went to the apartment he shared with his brothers. Inside, they encountered Diego Ibarra, who also had visible scratches across his body. When questioned, he claimed the injuries were caused by cold weather. Further investigation revealed additional evidence, including gloves and cell phones. One of the phones contained a selfie posted to Snapchat that same morning. In the image, Diego was wearing a black Adidas hat and a dark hoodie, matching the clothing seen in surveillance footage. A roommate confirmed that the brothers often shared clothing and identified Diego as the individual seen in the footage. DNA analysis later confirmed that the DNA found under Lakin's fingernails matched Diego Ibarra. The thumbprint on her phone also matched his. Hair found on the recovered jacket was consistent with Lakin's, and the blood on Diego's hat was confirmed to be hers. On November 20th, Judge H. Patrick Haggard found Diego Ibarra guilty on all 10 charges, including malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping with bodily injury, and aggravated assault with intent to rape. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case stands as a stark reminder of how quickly an ordinary moment can turn into something irreversible, and how critical small pieces of evidence can become in uncovering the truth behind what happened. Now that was all for today, folks. If you enjoyed these horrifying clips, click to see more on the video on screen.